Replacing the brake pads on this 2018 generation Crosstrek was actually fairly simple. Start by breaking the lug nuts loose on the wheel you're going to start with, then jack it up at the proper jacking point on the pinch weld. Place your jack stand and then remove the wheel. Next, remove the bolts that hold the caliper onto the caliper bracket. If these bolts are original, they will have a 14mm head on them. You may have to hold the slide pin still with a wrench, but I didn't need to here. With those bolts off, you can move the caliper up and out of the way, and make sure it doesn't dangle by the brake hose. Take note of the orientation of this wear indicator. Remove the brake pads and inspect them for damage and or uneven wear. Now is a good time to inspect the inboard side of your rotor too. If everything appears to be in working order, clean up the caliper bracket, in particular where the pads are going to slide in and out. When installing the new front pads, you will most likely have a piece of metal that will give you trouble. You'll need to make sure this is installed in such a way that it can move in and out of the caliper freely. If you don't install these correctly, your brakes may not function properly, and that's about as unsafe as a car can be. There are a couple of ways that you can compress the caliper here. You can use whatever method you prefer, but if you're following my method exactly, I used one of my old brake pads and 2 clamps to push the caliper in evenly. Before you put the caliper back on, you may want to pull the slide pins out, make sure that they're not worn out, and re-grease them. You can now slide the caliper back over the pads and bolt it back to the caliper bracket. While you always want to check your brake lines anyway, this particular model actually had a recall for brake lines swelling near the caliper, so inspect that while you're in there. This particular car has actually had the recall done already, so we're all set here. You'll want to repeat these steps for the other side, but you also repeat these steps for the rear. Sometimes the rear has a more complicated design, but these are actually just a more simple version of the front. Even if you plan to just replace the front pads on this car, definitely take a look at the rears. Typically, cars wear out the front pads much faster than the rear pads, but on this particular car, my experience has been that as the front pads wear, the rear pads are not too far behind. We've had this car since new, and at the time of this video, it's got about 40,000 miles on it. The front pads definitely needed to be changed, and I don't feel like I'm being too overly preventative by changing the rears at the same time. Also, while you're doing this, make sure you pull fluid out of the master cylinder reservoir. I had this thing overflow on me a few times while I was doing this. It fills up faster than you think. Hopefully, this made changing the brake pads on your Subaru Crosstrek just a little bit easier. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Car Simplified video.